as the title suggests, this is an overview of Hare Krishna movement. This is more of a philosophical examination showing how our beliefs fit into a general scheme of religious movements, etc. Sometimes people, they see us on the streets and then they think there's some people jumping up and down with mridangas saying Hare Krishna and that's it. So, but actually Prabhupada wanted to impress upon people that this movement was not just a bunch of people singing or an emotional type of movement, but it had a very mature philosophy behind it. So that is more or less the purpose of this examination. So like all respectable movements in India, they have to have some tradition and they have to refer to scriptures. If it's not, in other words, we have those movements which follow the Vedic scriptures and they get classed as astika, even if they're atheistic. At least they say we follow the Vedas. And then we have those that don't follow the Vedas, those called nastika, which we usually say is atheism. But of course they could even be theistic of sorts, but they don't follow Vedas, so they're rejected completely. So there is a special respect given for those movements which follow the Vedas. Those that don't follow the Vedas were things in India like Charvaka's movement, which was basically materialistic. Eat, enjoy life as much as you can. Atma means the body. Enjoyment is the ultimate goal in life. That was his philosophy. And he had followers also. And then we have more renounced type of movements like the Jains. They don't accept the Vedic literature, but very renounced also. They're talking about, you know, spiritual development, renunciation of the world. And we have the Buddhists, of course. They also reject the Vedas completely. So they're all called Nastika. They don't accept the Vedic authority. And of course then we have all sorts of religions around the world also that don't accept the Vedic authority. So those that do accept the Vedic authority are given a special importance. But even then, even if they do accept the authority of the Vedas, many give the wrong conclusion, so they're also useless. But in any case, a movement traditionally in India should have a scriptural basis. We see in the modern world, many of the movements of India that come from India don't really have a spiritual basis at all. They don't refer to scriptures hardly at all. Most of these yoga movements and meditation movements, etc., they don't mention scriptures at all. Or they'll just mention Bhagavad Gita, but they don't really have any understanding of it. So our movement is actually deeply rooted in scripture. Very traditional movement. And when Lord Chaitanya began this movement, he did not write anything, but he empowered his devotees like Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami and Jiva Goswami to research and write works to establish the authority of what he was saying, using scriptures. So we can say it's an orthodox movement. So one of the works is the Bhagavatam. This is the main work that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used. Then we have the Bhagavad Gita, which is easier to assimilate because it's much smaller. One book instead of 12 volumes. And in the Bhagavad Gita we get much of the same conclusions as in the Bhagavatam, but in a summary form. So in the Bhagavad Gita we have a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna in which eventually Krishna explains different types of yoga, different methods. Now the word yoga, he doesn't go into detail and explain it. This one talks about karma yoga or jnana yoga or bhakti yoga. But we can simply say it means method. Though if we analyze it, yoga means to join together. It comes from the verb root yuj, yujate. In English we get the word union out of that, or yoke. link up the ox to the plow. That's the yoke. Yoga means to join together. Of course, that doesn't matter what are we joining together, Atma and God or whatever. So there's a controversy about that also. So anyway, Bhagavad Gita talks about yogas, different processes. So Krishna talks about karma yoga, and particularly in chapter 3. Krishna talks about this type of yoga, which means perform certain duties according to scriptural regulation in order to get your material maintenance in this world. Basically, that's what karma yoga is. So this is a general system of rules and regulations for people to live peacefully in a society with some job, occupation, with protection. You get your protection and you are productive in society. So out of this we get the varnas and the ashramas. Varnas are the different occupational classes. So we get the laborer class, the mercantile class, and agricultural class, the Vaishyas. We get the governmental class, the military and the police force. That's the Kshatriyas. And we get the Brahmanas, who are the spiritual class, the advisors and the teachers and knowers of the Vedas. So these are the different varnas. And they all have rules to follow, rules of conduct by which they are supposed to control their senses. So the idea is here, you control your senses so you have good karma, so that you can live comfortably birth after birth within the material world. So this is, you say, materialistic, but it's a way of keeping people happy in the material world if that's what they want. So it's a system of stabilizing society, not only one lifetime, but over many lifetimes. So you don't go down and suffer, but you go upwards. Of course, in this system, there's also, implicit is the idea that there's not just one lifetime, which is difficult for some people to accept, even scientists in particular. But even some religions don't want to accept, that we go from birth to birth to birth to birth, or life to life to life. But that's implicit in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, that you don't die and the Atma goes from one body to the other in endless births and deaths. So based on that, then we can go upwards or downwards. And if you follow the system of karma yoga, you can elevate yourself through the human species up until you get to the Devata life, that is the heavenly planets, where you can live for thousands and thousands of years and less sickness and whatever like this, so you can go up higher and higher and higher. So this is the promise of future lifetimes according to the system, but it's all material. Okay? And to do that, you follow rules and regulations, and you have rituals to follow. Somehow people are attached to some sort of rituals in their life, and therefore we find quite an obsession with rituals within karma yoga. Of course, it is more with the Brahmins and less with the Kshatriyas and less with the least with the Sudras, but still there is some sort of rituals they follow, and the remnants of that we have in the modern world are samskaras, which means a marriage ceremony, death ceremonies, education ceremonies, birth ceremonies, etc. like this. So these are major events, and they have rituals to go along with that. So that's for the householder. And of course then we have the bigger rituals, as we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam. They're doing sacrifices like horse sacrifices or Rajasuya sacrifices, etc. So quite elaborate rituals also, which require a lot of expertise and a lot of money as well. But anyway, on the smallest level, we get the household sacrifices, which are the daily fire sacrifice plus the samskars, which are done for the family members. So all of this is to create piety and punya so that you can survive life after life and live very comfortably. But that's not the goal of human life, according to the Bhagavad Gita, because the first teaching of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita is you're not the body at all, you're the soul. So why do we have to take care of the body so much? Huh? So then, if you're taking care of your body, hopefully when you get to Sattva Gun, you'll begin to inquire and say, well, why am I taking so much trouble to care for my body when I'm not the body at all? I'm the Atma. So then we have the process of Jnana Yoga for people who are sattvic. And they will inquire, or they have a natural propensity to ask the question, who am I? I don't think I'm this material body. I'm something beyond the body. I don't get satisfaction from sense enjoyment. So these persons study the Jnana Kanda, particularly the Upanishads, and they study the Brahma Sutras. So these works explain the nature of the Atma in relation to the body and how to get free from it. So it's a lot, quite intellectual, and they also perform austerities with the goal of separating the soul eternally from the material body. So that is called moksha, or liberation, or mukti. And this way you end karma, you end rebirth in the material world. And in this way it's quite similar to Buddhism. I'm going to say nirvana, get rid of karma completely. Okay, so of course in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains this particularly in some of the later chapters, but also even in chapter 4. We have one chapter called Jnana Yoga there, so he explains something of how you merge the Atma into Brahman, etc. So this is basically impersonal realization. Brahman is has got no form. Then we have Astanga Yoga, which is described in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. This is, of course, the yoga that people do with the yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, jhana, and samadhi. 8 steps towards samadhi, which means realization of Atma and freedom from karma, and then liberation. So this is similar to Jnana Yoga. Idea is liberation from the body, but unlike Jnana Yoga, which is basically intellectual, this is physical. So you concentrate on asanas, pranayama, pratyahara, meditation until you get to the realization of Atma. All right? So similar goal. And then in Bhagavad Gita, from chapter 7 through 12, we get 6 chapters dedicated to Bhakti Yoga. So the goal here is not simply to get free of karma, but rather to establish a relationship with the Lord and to develop our own spiritual body with form and qualities, etc., by which we get bliss. So in the process of Bhakti Yoga, we have realization of a Supreme Lord who has form. He has a personality. So that's why Prabhupada says he's called the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the highest Godhead, plus he is personality, and he's the Supreme Person. At the same time, the Supreme Lord can appear within the material world as avatar, as he did 5,000 years ago with Krishna, and 500 years ago with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the form of the Lord can be various. Most religions struggle with any form of God, but in the Vaishnavas, they say, okay, God can have many forms, not just one form, but many forms. So therefore we get Nrsimhadev, who was like a lion. We get Ramchandra, who's a king. We get Parsuram, who's a warrior. We get Vamanadev, who's a dwarf. We get Kurma, who's a turtle. We get Vraha, who's a pig or a boar. And we get Matsya, who's a fish. So we get a variety of species even, very extremely different forms of the Lord as avatars. So the ultimate goal of Bhakti Yoga is bliss by establishing a relationship of love with the Supreme Lord. And the process of doing that is to practice expressing love. So that's what we call Bhakti Yoga. To engage ourselves in service of the Lord, trying to express our affection for the Lord. That is what bhakti is. And when we can perfect that affectionate relationship, it's called prema. pure love. So, of course, this is described in the definition of bhakti in the Nectar of Devotion: engagement of the senses, plus that inclination to serve the Lord, to realize the Lord. That's the definition of sadhana bhakti. Okay. So in this process we have some interesting features. Not only does God have a form, not only he has many forms, but we can also have a form in the temple. The deity form, the Archa Vigraha, which is quite unique and very controversial for many religions. They don't have any form. They can't accept a form at all, but then if you have a form which is made out of material elements, and that's very sacrilegious or whatever. They completely object to that. But here we have forms of the Lord in the temple. So this is one unique feature. But apart from that, we can have the form of the Lord within sound as the mantra, or in simply the name of the Lord in kirtan. So we have many ways we can access that form of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so as a secondary product of that bhakti, we get liberation from the material world. We get free of the karma. We don't have to take birth and death again in the material world. And that Atma develops a spiritual body with a form similar to the Supreme Lord, so we can serve the Lord. So that's a special feature of bhakti yoga. Yeah. So, to get into more details of the philosophy, we have to compare the philosophy with other philosophies. Philosophy basically has different areas. One is epistemology. That is, how do we get knowledge? Another type of part of philosophy is logic. So in the Western world they do have logical things. Going back to the Greeks, they established logical principles in Greek philosophy, you know. And then we have something called metaphysics, ontology. What exists? How do they exist? What is the relationship, which we call sambandha gyan? And then we have aesthetics. That's part of philosophy also. And for us that means rasa and prema. So epistemology part of it, of course, is, though we do have senses and we do have the mind and the intelligence, the emphasis is upon accepting the authority of the Vedas, which we call sabda. So sabda is the supreme authority for getting knowledge. We have to refer to scriptures. As I said, those that accept the Vedas are given special honor. Those that don't accept the Vedas are considered outright useless. So we have Jains, Sikhs, Buddhists, Charvakas, and all of the religions of the world are kind of discarded. Those that accept the Vedas, I said, are there, but even they also have wrong interpretations. So in India, the people that accepted the Vedas, they had their own little groups, starting with some sage. So we end up with 6 major groups of philosophers tracing their knowledge and their system and their realization back to the Vedas. So we have Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Karma, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. These are called the Saddarshanas, or the 6 basic philosophical outlooks, so to speak. Darshana means showing or whatever like that, or seeing. So, knowledge is the basis, and knowledge comes from scriptures. And so we accept the Vedic scriptures, as do the other darshanas. Besides that, logic can be used. Sense perception also is very necessary in some sense, because even to read the scriptures we have to use our eyes and our mind. So they're also useful, but they're not the main element in getting the knowledge. First we go to the scripture, then we use our senses and our mind to discuss this and get the meaning out of it. So we have epistemology, and then we get the metaphysical aspects, and what's what, Sambandha Gyan, etc., and the rasa. So that's all determined from the scriptures. So when we talk about philosophy, we use logic to analyze and get the real meaning of the scriptures, and then make it, give it a reasonable explanation. That's what we call our philosophy. So we get the scriptures, and we get perception, and we get logic as elements, but scripture is the main thing. Okay. So we have the Vedic scriptures. So these are nicely defined. Unfortunately, in the modern world, in India, people come out with new scriptures, and they start writing their own scriptures in the modern world even. But no, they're traditional. We have what are called traditional scriptures, so we have to accept those. So we have the 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharva Veda. There's no dispute about that. But these Vedas have the parts: Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, and Samhita. So this Brahmanas and Aranyaka part of the Vedas, which deal with sacrifices, is called the Purvamimamsa, or the Karma Kanda. And this is used in one of the darshanas a lot. That is the Karma Mimamsa philosophy of Jainini. Okay. Upanishads are very famous, and these are the things that are usually studied in universities, even in the Western world. When they come to, Indian culture, they'll study Upanishads. So it's called the Uttara Mimamsa, or the later conclusion, or the Jnana Kanda. And a lot of them speak about Brahman, and they condemn the previous karma aspect. It is all material world. We have to rise above the material world and get knowledge of Brahman. So this is a Gyan Kanda. And this becomes studied in a lot of the darshanas, particularly Vedanta darshana. And we have the Samhita portion, which are the or Upasana Kanda, which Upasana means worship. So these are the verses of the Vedas which are used to praise Devatas and Vishnu. The verses. But that's the Vedas. They're very vast, a huge amount of books. But besides that, then we have the supplementary literatures. So one category is called the Itihas, or the epic histories. And into the primary ones is the Ramayana, which is very famous about Ramchandra, and there's Mahabharata, also very famous. This is the story of the Kurukshetra war, and in that we get the Bhagavad Gita. So they're largely stories, but they do have philosophical elements in them, teachings, a lot of teachings in them. And in Mahabharata we get the Bhagavad Gita as the essence of all the teachings. And then we have the Puranas, 18 major Puranas, 6 for the people in Tamagun, 6 for the people in Rajagun, 6 for the people in Sattvagun. So the Tamagun Puranas glorify Agni and Shiva as supreme. Rajagun Puranas glorify Brahma as supreme, and the Sattvic Puranas glorify Vishnu as supreme. So for people on different modes, different worship is recommended. These are written by Veda Vyas as a gradual method. As well as that, Veda Vyas wrote the Brahma Sutras to explain the Upanishads, because the Upanishads were a little difficult to understand. So he wrote this all in sutra form. Sutra means, of course it means thread, literally, thread. A sutra is a thread, like you thread a garland with a sutra. But it also refers to a brief series of words to express an idea. So in other words, it's like a little outline of something, and just with a few words we say something, and then another few words, another few words. So we just get a series of few words here which looks like a little outline for something. So the sutras are very, very brief words, 3 words, 5 words, maximum 8 words or so. And that's one sutra, and then they have 4 volumes of this to explain Upanishads. Commentary on Upanishads. The Smriti scriptures, these are explaining the Varnashram system and Karma Yoga. So we have famous Manu Smriti, Yagyavalkya Smriti, Atri Smriti, Vishnu Smriti, Harita Smriti, Sukra Smriti, etc. All these different things explaining the various rules of the Varnashram system and how the king should rule and punish, etc. The castes, the Varnas, the Ashramas rules. We also get Pancharatric scriptures, 108 texts, all describing Vishnu and how to worship Vishnu. Largely it has to do with deity worship, establishing temples, the conduct of the Vaishnava. So all of this is considered to be scriptures, but in our Sampradaya, though we accept them all as bona fide, ultimately we take Bhagavatam as the conclusion of everything. So that's our epistemology. Ultimately we should refer to Bhagavatam to get the truth. Why? Because Bhagavatam is a summary of everything else. The Vedas were written, but then we got the Upanishads as the Jnana section, the important part of it. Vedavyasa wrote the Brahma Sutras to explain the Upanishads, but Bhagavatam is considered to be the natural commentary on the Brahma Sutras, because the Brahma Sutras are too difficult to understand. So it's expanded into the Bhagavatam. So also the Vedavyasa wrote the Puranas and the Mahabharata to explain the Vedas, because the Vedas were too difficult for the people of Kali Yuga. But they're very long. And then the Puranas are giving all sorts of different types of worship. So Narada Muni told Vedavyasa, don't confuse people. Just tell them one object to worship, Krishna. So then finally he wrote Bhagavatam of all the Puranas. So this is the summary of the Puranas, the Brahma Sutras, the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, and the Vedas. So we take this as the final authority in epistemology. So, as I said, if you accept the Vedas, whatever, then it's a good credit. If you reject them, then it's considered to be Nastika. So we have these 6 darshanas coming out that I mentioned previously: Yoga, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purvamamsa, and Vedanta. So, just to summarize very quickly, Sankhya was founded by a sage called Kapila. We have another Kapila mentioned in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam, who was an avatar of the Supreme Lord, who teaches Jnana, Karma, Yoga, and Bhakti. So he is the real Kapila. This Kapila is an atheistic Kapila, not an avatar of the Lord. What he teaches is Sankhya philosophy, which Sankhya literally means either counting or analysis. So in his philosophy he analyzes all the material elements, very similar to the Bhagavatam, which I've shown in Canto 3, where we get Mahatattva and Ahankara and mind, and Devatas and senses and sense objects and material elements. This is the Sankhya. This is the material world. So this is, we accept that's similar to this Sankhya philosophy. But then he also has Atma, which he calls Purusha. So we have souls or jivas, and we have this matter, which is all these other elements. There's no God. So the whole goal is for Atma to separate himself from the body and say, I am Atma. Then he's free. So no God. Just Atma getting free from matter. That's Sankhya philosophy. And they have Sankhya sutras. He has some sutras quoting and saying, oh, this is from the Vedas, etc. That is true. So, but we see no existence of God in his philosophy at all. Quite like the Nastika philosophies or whatever. So we have Yoga philosophy. Patanjali, he wrote the Yoga Sutras. So in that he explains the system of 8 stages of Astanga Yoga. It's allied with the Sankhya philosophy, similar. He accepts the same categories of elements, etc. Also accepts Atma. He also accepts a little bit of God. He calls it Ishvara Pranidan, or worship of God. So that's also mentioned. But when he analyzes very carefully, he doesn't get too much devotion to that idea of God there. Okay. So Sankhya had this scripture, and we get jiva and matter, and then we got a little bit of addition of a God, but he doesn't have too much importance in the Patanjali's yoga philosophy. The sage Gautama produced Nyaya philosophy, This means logic. Nyaya means logic. So this is quite an important philosophy because even we use the logical system that he set up. This is quite maybe similar to the Greek use of logic also. This system of logic was used, they say, to prove that God exists. So in that sense it's good. So he believes in a supreme God, but he's impersonal. So the process is use intelligence and logic and understand there is a supreme God and the jiva can get free of matter. Basically a type of jnana yoga with God in it, unlike Sankhya, which has no God. Again, basically it's liberation from the material world through intellectual use of logic. Vaisheshika philosophy was established by a sage called Kanada. And one of his concepts is that everything in the material world is made of little particles called atoms. So there's an atomic theory. He also accepts a God who activates the particles. But basically he's impersonal, and we can set another type of jnana yoga. Okay, so these two philosophies accept God, they accept material world with all the elements, and they also accept a jiva. But God is impersonal. And they based it upon the Vedas. Purvamimamsa, this is the philosophy of Jaimini. So he takes the Karmakanda section of the Vedas and then shows that by doing sacrifices you can go to Svargaloka. And in the scriptures it says Svargaloka is eternal. So it says that is the goal for human beings, to do sacrifices to go to Svargaloka, and that's eternal happiness. So that's his idea. So you simply do the sacrifices, get the result, and go there. So this is where we get karma yoga philosophy coming out, worship of many devatas. So this is polytheistic, and he doesn't really believe in a supreme lord. So it's almost atheistic as well. And at best we can say polytheistic, but certainly not monotheistic. In spite of the fact he claims to be following the Vedas. Yeah. So therefore we get, again, jiva is there, get out of matter, but not get out of matter, just promote himself within matter. So there's no liberation in this idea of karma mimamsa philosophy. So the sixth philosophy is Vedanta, founded by Veda Vyas, who wrote the Brahma Sutras. So this emphasizes study of the Upanishads, largely which show jnana and dealing with Brahman. But there are many interpretations of the Vedanta Sutras and Upanishads. So this is where we get a little problem. But at least there is an idea of one supreme God, which we may call Brahman or Bhagavan. But out of this we get various interpretations of the sutras of the Upanishads. So, Vedanta schools, one is Advaita. This is the famous philosophical school which is usually studied in universities in India and the Western world as well. This is the major philosophical school for most people studying Indology. Advaita's philosophy, which is another type of Jnana Yoga. Advaita means non-difference or oneness. Dvaita means two, means not two, only one. So his idea is that only Brahman exists. Jiva does not exist. Material world does not exist. The only reality is Brahman. So this is what we call absolute non-dualism, Advaita. And that Brahman is impersonal. No form, no qualities, no activities. Does not even create a material world. Because the material world is illusion. Yeah? So he claims to have basis in Upanishads, Vedas, so acceptable for many people. So this became very strong in India. In fact, before him, Buddhism became very strong, and the Vedic adherence to the Vedas was getting weaker and weaker until Shankara, who was the founder, came, and he defeated the Buddhists. And again, acceptance of the Vedas became strong. So he was credited with this. Also, we claim he is avatar of Shiva, to establish the Vedas, because Buddhists say no Vedas. So then he conquered the Buddhists and defeated them, so therefore Vedas got a role to play. So according to the Vedas, then he says only one God and nothing else, and no form, no qualities, no activities. Matter and jiva is unreal. No, what's that? Okay, so now we got the Vaishnava interpretation of Vedanta. We have different groups of Vaishnavas. What do they all believe in? One supreme God, many jivas or atmas who are real, a real material universe. Bhakti is a method, and love of God or prema as the goal. So all the Vaishnava schools will agree to this. And the God has form, qualities, activities, not impersonal. So why we have many schools? Because they have some details of philosophical difference of relationship of God to the world, basically. And of course in terms of rasa, some difference. So how does God relate to everything? How does God relate to the souls and to the jivas and to matter? So we got Vishishta Advaita philosophy. So this is as Advaita, like Shankar's impersonal philosophy, but this is not impersonalism. In fact, Ramanujacharya, who's the leader or founder of this type of Vedanta, he was a ferocious attacker of Shankar. He was one of the first persons to conquer or to refute Shankar's doctrines of only Brahman. And instead he argued that Brahman doesn't, in the Vedanta Sutras, doesn't mean impersonal, it means Bhagavan. So he was the first one to very logically argue against Shankaracharya's logical arguments and his interpretation of the Upanishads. So it's called non-dualism, which is qualified, which means God has qualities. But he keeps the idea of Advaita, that is, God is everything. But within that we have qualities. So therefore God himself has qualities, he has form, qualities, activities. The jiva is real, matter is real. They are like the qualities of God. So God is one with the universe and jivas. They are like the qualities of God almost. In essence, says everything is one with God. So everything is real, but Vishnu is independent, and jivas and matter are dependent on him, and they're like qualities of an object. So when we have an object, like a microphone, so it's an object, but then we can start saying, well, the object has qualities. It is black, it's got a long tube here, it's got a round thing at the end, it's got a cord out here, so these are part of the qualities of the object. So how does the quality relate to the object? Each little quality cannot be the object. Black cannot be the object, the microphone. This cannot be the microphone. But together all the qualities, they kind of make up the microphone, but even the microphone's a little bit separate from the qualities. There's some total of the qualities, isn't it? So, but they're intimately related. We cannot separate the quality from the object. So like that, God cannot be separated from matter and jiva. They're all kind of one. So that's the Advaita aspect. Nevertheless, we accept they're both, the jiva is real, matter is real. So that's his explanation. Vishishta Advaita, qualified oneness. Like that. So it's all within the Supreme Lord, matter and jivas, etc. Sometime after that, Madhvacharya appeared, and he taught a different philosophy called Dvaita. He said this Advaita is nonsense. There's no oneness anywhere. Everything is different. He even attacked Ramanujacharya for his Vishishta Advaita. Advaita is bad, Shankaracharya, Vishishta Advaita also bad. There is no oneness. It's all different. This is Dvaita. So we have a Supreme Lord, we have matter, different from God, we have jivas, different from God and different from matter. Everything is different by nature. That's Dvaita. Don't have to think about oneness at all. And The Supreme Lord is there. He's got qualities and activities, and he is the controller of matter and the jivas. Yeah? And he takes Mahabharata as one of his main proofs. They all refer to Upanishads, a lot to Upanishads. Ramanuja also takes Vishnu Purana as one of his main proofs. Huh? So Madhvacharya often quotes the Mahabharata as a main proof for him. So we have Supreme Lord, different from spiritual world, different from matter, different from jivas. Everything dependent on Supreme Lord. Then we get something called Dvaita Dvaita. Advaita plus Dvaita. Oneness and duality. This is philosophy of Nimbarka Acharya. Not so popular or prominent as the other two, in the first two, but nevertheless he has written a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra and some other works, and he has followers still in India, even in Vrindavan. One other interesting fact is that he worships Krishna. They're followers of Krishna. So this means dualism and non-dualism, or oneness. Oneness and dualism at the same time. So, jiva and matter are different from the Lord because they have different qualities from the Lord, but they're also non-different because they're completely dependent on the Lord. There's a oneness by being dependent on the Supreme Lord. So this he calls the oneness and difference. So it's midway between Ramanuja's philosophy and Madhva's philosophy. So we have one Supreme God, and he takes Krishna as Supreme. Then we have another philosophy called Suddha Advaita, pure monism. Advaita, but very pure. This is what Vallabhacharya produced, who was a contemporary of Lord Chaitanya. And this is also quite a strong movement in India, particularly in Gujarat. And they also worship Krishna. But usually it's a baby form of Krishna with Vatsalya Rasa. He also met Lord Chaitanya. So it's called pure non-duality. And the world is, which means non-dual, everything, the world is a subtle form of Brahman. So the Brahman modifies itself and somehow becomes the world, but it's not illusory as in Shankaracharya's philosophy of Advaita. So it's a modification of Brahman. And the jiva is also Brahman. So that's why it's oneness, because it has consciousness and bliss like the Supreme Lord. So in that sense he calls it oneness. And Brahman for him is also Krishna and the avatar forms. Okay, so we have those different types. Then we have a fifth form. We trace Lord Chaitanya to the Madhva Sampradaya, but his philosophy actually is different. This is Achintya Bheda Bhed. So it's something like Dvaita Dvaita, Bheda Abheda, difference and non-difference. But it is Achintya, which means inconceivable. This Dvaita Dvaita is natural, natural dualism. He says that, he argues that duality and monism, though they look like opposites, are naturally inherent in everything. Lord Chaitanya says, no, it's contrary to have opposites like difference and non-difference, oneness and many. But they can exist simultaneously by the inconceivable power of the Supreme Lord. So that's the Achintya aspect of it. So we can also have Brahman, the oneness aspect, everything is Brahman. But we can also have Bhagavan, who has form, qualities, activities. We can have matter and jivas, different from Supreme Lord, but they're also one with the Supreme Lord, by Achintya Shakti of the Lord. So basically it's a spiritual, or we can say it's a explanation. All these are explanations of how God relates to the material world. Is he one with the world or different from the world, or is he one and different from the material world? So it's a philosophical question that comes up. In addition to that, in Lord Chaitanya's philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bhed, then we also get the idea of rasa, which does not occur in the other Vaishnava philosophies. They don't talk about rasa much. But with Lord Chaitanya, this becomes a very prominent feature. That is the experience of love of the Supreme Lord. And then there's various types of rasa, and ultimately we get Madhurya rasa, the relationship of Radha and Krishna. So in his philosophy, the main work is the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavat Purana. So in this way we get all these different philosophies. We get purely atheistic philosophy where there is no God, like Sankhya philosophy. Atma exists, Prakriti exists, but no God. Even if they accept the Vedas. We get polytheistic, with many devatas, that's Purvamimamsa of Jaimini, go to heavenly planets. We get monistic theories, there is some sort of impersonal God up there in the Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, and Vedanta. And then in this monistic category, we got the impersonal ideas, like in Yoga and Nyaya and Vaisheshika and Shankar's Vedanta. And then we get the personal monotheism with Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, and Vallabha. Then we get personal impersonal with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with Achintya Bheda Bhed. Of course, Nimbarka also we can say is personal impersonal in one sense. So in this way we get a wide variety of interpretations of Vedanta and other Vedic literatures, of which these ones we consider to be useless, basically because they come to the wrong conclusion. They're either atheistic or there's no, if he's God, he's impersonal. And we will accept the personal aspects here. So, we accept all the personal aspects of God, but Lord Chaitanya is the most personal. We call it extreme personalism. Because we have a relationship with Krishna. And there the relationship is very intimate. Another aspect of Lord Chaitanya's movement is the process. Bhakti Yoga is the process, as in all of these. Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha, also Bhakti Yoga. Lord Chaitanya's Bhakti Yoga is unique because it has Sankirtan as the main process in Bhakti. This makes it distinct from the other Vaishnava philosophies. So as I said, the rasa is stressed in our philosophy. And here there's a choice of rasa. You could be servant, friend, parent, or lover. Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, or Madhurya. In other Vaishnava philosophies like Ramanuja and Madhva, it is only Dasya rasa. In Nimbarka is Madhurya, and in Vallabha it is Vatsalya. So, in our philosophy we have very particular definitions. So we give a very precise definition of bhakti. What is this devotion? Continuous service or emotions directed towards Krishna in his expanded forms or others related to him, with a pleasing attitude towards him. We're favorable to him. It should be devoid of desires other than the desire to please the Lord, and unobstructed by impersonal gain, materialistic rituals of karma, or other unfavorable acts. So within the bhakti then we have sadhana bhakti, which is the practice, bhav bhakti, which is first initial realization of the Lord, usually internal, and then we have the final level, prema, where we get full realization and activation of our body fully, and we can enter into the pastimes of the Lord. So in sadhana bhakti, the definition, as we studied in the Nectar Devotion, was actions of the senses which will produce the stage of bhava. And so by using the senses in sadhana, we get to the bhava stage where we realize the Lord. Okay? And how do we use the senses? Shravanam, we hear Bhagavatam. Darshana, we see the form of the Lord and the festivals of the Lord. Kirtana, glorify the Lord, sing the names of the Lord. Smell the incense offered to the Lord, or the flowers. Eating, the tongue, prasad, we take prasadam. The whole body, you can do dancing for the Lord. And mind, we can meditate or do japa. Think of the Lord, smaranam or jhana. And of all of these, then the main process is chanting the holy name, which is emphasized by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Yuga Dharma, or the process for this age, also mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as the most effective process in Kali Yuga. So this is the main process which we follow, chanting the name of the Lord. So why Krishna? Why do we worship Krishna among all the forms of the Lord? Because he displays all the qualities in full. And that's 64 qualities. All power and all knowledge, all sweetness in relationships. And this is preferable to the reverential worship that we get in Dasya with Vishnu form or even with Ramchandra. So what are the special qualities? One is Rupa Madhurya, the sweetness of Krishna's form. Very, very special sweetness which will invoke a intimate type of love. He has intimate relationships with his devotees. So we have friendship relationships, Sakya. We have parental relationship, like Mother Yasoda. That's all your relationship. We have Madhurya Rasa with the gopis. Or we have servant relationship with his servants. So all very intimate. And we have very sweet pastimes of Krishna. And these are described in the first 35 chapters or so, or 40 chapters of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. His pastimes in Vrindavan. So we have many, many sweet pastimes there. And he has a sweet flute. The playing of the flute is so special that it attracts everybody. It melts the rocks. It paralyzes the water so it doesn't flow. And the trees become ecstatic and start blossoming and showing buds, etc. And the clouds stop in the sky. And the birds go into samadhi. And the cows begin to cry. And when they hear the sound of the flute, and of course the gopis go wild and they run out of their houses and they go into the forest looking for Krishna. So the sound of the flute is very spectacular. So these are special qualities of Krishna that we don't find in other forms of the Lord. All sweet. So this distinguishes Krishna from everything else. So in Krishna we have complete relationships. There is a variety of relationships, which we call rasa. So if you want, you can have God as a master and you could be the servant. That's one form. And if you want, you can have that with Krishna also. You can have God as a friend, as an equal. So that's what friendship is, equal. Sakya rasa. God can be dependent on you. That is being the parent of Krishna. And Krishna is the child. That's called Vatsalya Rasa, or parental love. And then we have the relationship of conjugal love, or Madhurya Rasa. So all of these are available with Krishna, within Rasa. So this makes them very, very special. So these intimate rasas produce highest type of bliss for everyone. So that's why we take Krishna as the object of worship. So that way we can get the highest type of bliss. Oh, okay, fine. Any questions? No.
So like you mentioned the six initial six schools, basically saying they're useless, but yesterday's Vedanta school is in there, so how is that useless?
Well, yeah, they're all useless except Vedanta, but some of the Vedanta is also useless because that's Shankaracharya's philosophy. So the Vaishnava Vedanta is the true interpretation of the Vedas, or true meaning, and then the impersonal Vedanta of Shankaracharya is a misinterpretation.
Yeah, but Vyasa is the founder of that Vedanta school.
Yeah, because he wrote the Brahma Sutras. That's what we mean. Vedanta is Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras. So he wrote the Brahma Sutras, which are the basis of Shankaracharya's philosophy, but he misinterprets it. So therefore we have Vaishnava commentaries on the same sutras. So Ramanuja wrote a commentary, Madhvacharya wrote a commentary, Vallabha wrote a commentary, Nambaka wrote a commentary, and Baladeva Vibhusan and our Sampradaya wrote a commentary to refute all of the impersonal views of Shankar. So that's Vedanta.
Yesterday he was the original author, we're still saying his works are useless.
No, we're saying that interpretation is useless.
Okay,
So, yeah. So in other words, if we take Bhagavad Gita and then we come out, Shankaracharya says that surrender to Krishna means merge in Brahman, and then we say it's useless. We're not rejecting the work or the Veda-Vyasa's authorship, but the interpretation becomes useless. So it is equivalent to being Nastika almost, not accepting the Vedas because we get the wrong meaning from the Vedas.
So I have heard that the other five, Sankira and etc., that they can be considered the eternally five false
Philosophies. Yeah.
And more or less they really encompass every philosophy that a person could conjure up. So if you're hearing another philosophy, you could pigeonhole it into one of those
Probably.
five,
Yeah.
and then there's the standard process of defeating them.
Yeah.
Does that sound correct?
In other words, we can take all philosophies or religions, and we can, well, of course, we can have the completely atheistic ones, like just enjoy in the world. So that's Jaimini's philosophy. Then we have, okay, we'll accept some sort of God, but it's impersonal. And so therefore we get Sankhya and all these other ones. No, Sankhya no, but we get the other ones. I don't think there's any other philosophies that say Jiva and matter but no God. That's quite unique to Sankhya philosophy, but most religions of the world accept a God also. So they accept a God, but he's impersonal. So that's where we get the Nyaya philosophy and the Kannada philosophy. They accept a God, a Jiva, and material world, but it's all, the God's impersonal. So therefore we'll get religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam will have an impersonal God. Yeah? So they can be fitted in that category. But then we get the unique philosophy of Shankaracharya, which has no material world, no jiva at all, which is quite unique, which we don't find around the world, except we'll find it in Buddhism. But they say no Brahman also. So the unique feature of Shankaracharya to distinguish from Buddhism is there is something real, Brahman. Whereas Buddhists say nothingness is supreme. So it's modified Buddhism, covered Buddhism, we say.
You know the four schools of the Vaishnava schools, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, etc., was on your chart mentioned that they were personal.
Yeah.
Lord Chaitanya was personal stroke impersonal. So
Achinta Beta Beta.
Yeah. So the other four Sampradayas don't really accept the existence of the Brahman?
Not really. They argue against it. But we say we can accept it, but it's only an aspect of Bhagavan. Yeah. So we have Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So that's another interesting feature of our philosophy. We say that from the Bhagavatam, whereas they just say Brahmana, it's useless. This is Shankaracharya's concoction.
But we have the verse in Bhagavatam, that Brahmanati, Bhagavan.
Yeah.
There's such a reference for
Yeah. So that's why we take Bhagavatam as the Brahman, because we get all three aspects mentioned very clearly there. Not only in that place, but at the end of the Bhagavatam also it's there, other places as well.
Just one quick comment before I start on my other sort of topic about Christianity, which you mentioned it just briefly. But when you're talking about sutras, also, in the Bhagavad Gita, the 7th chapter, it says, Sutra Manik Kanai Vada Dil Pearls and Strung.
Oh, that's a sutra, yeah. There's a thread.
Yeah. So just basically talking about all these philosophies, and at each point in time it had their precedence in the history of the world. But that's like in the East, so if we trace it through in this Kali Yuga, we could see that, you know, there was Karma Kanda, and then they were doing animals like sacrifice. So Buddha come along and said, no, don't be the Vedas, Nirvanas and whatever. And then Shankaracharya come along. And he said, well, you know, you start to read the Vedas because you won't get anywhere there. So it started on impersonalism there. And so that was all coming from India. So like, you know, if you're not a devotee in India, you're basically a Shankarite, right? So 9% of India is Shankarite. But we come from the tradition here in the West, where we come from the Christian tradition. And if you look at Christianity, there is a sort of beginning there, and there's a philosophy behind it. That the philosophy of Christianity is basically Buddhism, if you sort of analyze it, that you sort of peace to all living entities. And Jesus, well, they say he went to India and he was influenced by Buddhism anyway, so he brought that back with him. But basically, you know, the scholars say that there is a lot of Buddhism there. At the same time, he also came from the tradition of the Old Testament there, where there was a caring God. There was definitely a personal God. He spoke to him, and he was initiated in that tradition there by John the Baptist. So he brought both of those traditions, like the Buddhism, but he also brought a personal God. Like somewhere along the line in the last 2,000 years, we're saying that Christianity is impersonal, but for a long time there was, you know, God the Father, and he was
He's not so impersonal as Shankaracharya, with no form, no qualities, no activity, but they don't want to accept a form. He is a person, but he has no, you can never give him a form. So he has qualities, he's got personality, but no form.
So my question is that in the future, seeing as we've got all these different schools of philosophy, will it ever be accepted that, you know, Christianity, you know, from the point of view of scholars, was also another branch of philosophy which sort of emerged, which has influenced all of us, sort of thing, as a, you know, as another philosophy that's there. Of course, that's also like got a place like the Sankarites. You know, they the babies defeat the Sankarites, saying that, you know, Krishna's free personality of God. So the Christians also have got a weak philosophy. You know, the babies can defeat Christianity. So that's also another means to a goal. Do you think that?
Well, I would think probably the next, if we want to keep Christianity, maybe they should accept a more personal God with a particular form, try to get to at least accept a form of God. That's one thing. And the other is to, instead of talking about God, to have a realization of God and try to develop a process for getting the realization, which some Christians have done in the past. So we have groups that were meditating and trying to experience the ecstasy of God, etc. So that's a good direction to go in, rather than simply have doctrines, accept Christ and be saved, or you're damned forever like this. So if they get to that level, then very good. They have it becomes, you know, it's a level of, you know, permitted level of being a Vaishnava if they do that.
Well, in the beginning of the class you mentioned third chapter of Bhagavad Gita in reference to sacrifice and how you can, that chapter will give you a good life.
You'd be comfortable.
The early planets comfortable. But I've never heard of Krishna referring to utilizing the fact of controlling the senses, not just to elevate yourself to the higher planets, which is obviously better than stay here, but more so that if you control the senses, you don't end up in the mess that we're in now ecologically, for example. Because if you look at all the fossil carbon and whatever we use, the oil, and then some people, they come up with solar panels and they come up with gas, natural gas, whatever, stuff like that. But it's all the same. It's basically over-exploiting. But I have never heard references purposes of controlling senses, because then you don't overexploit the place
Yeah.
where you are.
Yeah.
Because those people nowadays are just shifting from basically, let's take all the oil on the planet, like Narjipal was doing, and then we shift to solar panel or whatever, but that's also taking some other raw material from Europe.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but I've heard Krishna mentioned in Bhagavad Gita or any other places, when you do control senses, you can stay in a certain place, but you don't rate the place, so if you do that.
Okay. Well, I think it's indirect in one sense, but we'll find this in the Bhagavatam, where we have the Parikshit and the bull and the cow. The cow is the earth. The bull is Dharma. That's the restrictions, the rules. And Kali's attacking the bull's leg, so in other words, Dharma is getting destroyed. No sense control. Breaking all the principles, religious principles, the four regulated principles, no sense control. And what does the cow do? The cow's crying. So that's the earth. So when the earth cries, the earth does not give its milk, so to speak. So in other words, if there's no sense control for the human being, then the earth suffers, and the earth will not give water, air, proper sunlight, minerals, food, etc. And weather conditions will be all set. So in other words, there's a delicate balance between the human being controlling his senses and the stability of the earth to keep giving support for the human being. So that's what that analogy gives us, that relationship between the earth and Dharma. If we control the senses, then cow is happy. If you don't control the senses, cow will not give. In other words, the earth and the Dharma are very closely related. Why? Because the human being is so intelligent that he can exploit everything and destroy everything by his exploitation. Animals generally don't do that. They have population control mechanisms for them, and they die out or whatever. But human beings, we are so clever, we can start really trying to exploit the earth like anything, and then that creates a big imbalance, and then we have to suffer. Yeah. So they talk about extinctions, you know, how the dinosaurs get extinct. So then we can say that the next extinction is the human being. He's so greedy, and they want to exploit everything that they just eventually destroy themselves. Yeah. So that's the possibility for the human being at this stage, that he destroy himself by his strange intelligence and greed for money. Yeah.
Like an idea, according to what you're saying, we should be probably focusing on people learning the control of senses and reducing the forgetting mentality.
Yeah, well, definitely. It's hard for people to do that, however, because they're so conditioned to enjoying in the material world. So simultaneous with that, we also have to supply them some, okay, what's the good thing other than simply, okay, and 2 generations later the earth will be a little more peaceful and like that. So the other thing is to give them some happiness now. So that's where we can give them some spiritual sadhana for them. And that thing gives them some contentment also. So we not only have to control the senses, but we also have to give the spiritual sadhana, and this will kind of give them an impetus for developing.
I don't understand why Krishna uses different forms to manifest himself.
Why he has to manifest different forms? Okay.
Especially when these forms doesn't glorify his name or his form, like the Buddha, for example.
Why he has to have different forms, like sound, mantra, deity form,
No,
or like avatars? Okay. Yeah. So, Lord is responsive to different devotees who have different ideas of how they want to have a relationship with God. So therefore, he'll take different forms. Or even with Krishna, people want different relationships. So therefore, for some he's a little baby, for some he's a friend, a cowherd boyfriend, rather he is lover of the gopis, different ages, because they have different way they want to fulfill their relationship with Krishna and love. So similarly with other forms of God, which are basically all dasya, a little bit formal, but they want to serve God in different ways. So some people like a valiant form of God, a heroic form of God, or a kingly form of God, so they may choose Ramchandra, who's an ideal king, and they like that. You know, like Hanuman, he just so much in love with that idea of the regal, father-like figure of Ramchandra controlling the kingdom and ruling in an ideal way. So that's one way. The other is, of course, like Vishnu himself in Vaikuntha, very, very four arms and very spectacular, not so human as Ramchandra, more elevated and more powerful, a form of Vishnu, yeah? In Vaikuntha with great opulence and power, etc. That's another form. Then we get these other forms like, let's say, Nrsimhadev. Some people want a more, ferocious form of the Lord who likes to punish the demons. You get Nrsimhadev for those people. Even devotees, some people like Nrsimhadev more than Krishna. They like this, this type of form. So for different devotees, and the Lord has different forms because they have different ways they want to express their love.
You mentioned part of the definition of bhakti was directing one's emotions towards Krishna.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone has negative emotions from time to time.
Yeah.
As devotees, is it appropriate to direct negative emotions towards Krishna in a way to purify them and to say directly?
Well, negative emotions could be hatred. Direct your hatred towards Krishna, no.
Not like hating Krishna, but say I've had complications in my day-to-day life and I'm feeling bad.
Yeah.
And then can I somehow connect them? How do I connect negative emotions?
Yeah, well, that means we're just disturbed by material energy, more or less, and we're getting all sorts of distractions from material energy. So that's, we say, they are a condition in the material world in any case. And the combat to that is steadiness in practice of bhakti. Yeah? And the more we try to express our love for Krishna, then, which means, ultimately, it means surrender. I'm the servant of the Lord, I'm not the master. So humility is involved in that. And of course the love is involved with that, unconditional love. So that will start to cancel out all these other anxieties and attachments we have in the material world. So the expression of bhakti will automatically reduce the, say, the anarthas and all these negative emotions that are there. Okay, Hare Krishna.